Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we're releasing a special episode from a project that I undertook in 2022 called the Boundless Body Radio Premium Podcast. My intention was to take all of the best clips from our show about one particular topic and put them together as a masterclass to be released behind a paywall with a subscription-based service on Patreon. Well, we didn't have many subscribers, so I'm breaking these episodes up and releasing them here for free so that they can make an impact and hopefully help some people out there. Today's episode was taken from the first series, all about the 3 macronutrients. This is part 2 from the very first episode, all about protein. We actually did release this entire conversation back on episode 324 of Boundless Body Radio, so we could tease out the Boundless Body Radio Premium podcast, but we still wanted to re-release it here to keep everything in the same order. We always appreciate any feedback that you might have, so feel free to leave us a comment on YouTube or on our website at myboundlessbody.com, where you can always book a complimentary 30-minute session with us at any time. Cheers, and enjoy part 2 of this 2-part conversation all about protein.
Plants, in a way, I don't mean this to sound dramatic, but they fight back by putting chemicals in them to discourage us from wanting to eat them. So around us, if we were hunter-gatherers, we would most certainly find some success. And I believe around here, much of that would be, random berries and maybe some tuberous, roots that we could eat, and maybe a few more, and just undoubtedly, and I can't speak to them just because I'm not familiar enough with that area of research. So we would be able to get some plants, and many of them would become ripe towards the end of summer and early fall. And so even in the spring, for example, or even in the middle of the summer, although if you have your own garden, in fact, you tell me, I haven't had a garden since I was a boy. Nothing's coming ripe in the summer, right? Or maybe towards the end of summer.
Yeah, that's when you get those great tomatoes.
Yeah, right. So this would be like July, August. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I haven't gardened in a few years either, but my friends have, and I still get tomatoes every now and again.
Yeah, good. Well, but that's my point, though, is that there's a significant time where, well, regardless, even then, even in the summer when things would be full bloom, undoubtedly, I am just convinced our ancestors would have still been heavily reliant on animal-based foods. These sources of carbohydrates, which are fine, that's wonderful. I have no problem with them. They would have almost always been a bonus. In other words, hey, look, we got some berries. That's awesome. Let's add them to the meat that we're eating, or whatever. It's dessert after the meat. But humans, it makes me very curious how people could claim that humans are not omnivores. We are, or even more carnivore than we are herbivore. A human cannot live on plants alone.
So Dr. Ben Bikman mentioned that he doesn't consider himself an expert in human anthropology. So we're going to cut away here for a second. Luckily, we have talked to experts in human evolution, and we're going to start with Dr. Mickey Bendor, who is out of Israel. He is a paleoarchaeologist who spends his time studying our human evolution through the Paleolithic era. He really categorizes humans as fat hunters based on his really exciting and interesting research. And then we're also going to hear from Dr. Bill Schindler. He's also an archaeologist, and he is the author of the book Eat Like a Human. We have hosted him twice on our show. We've also hosted Mickey twice on our show. They've both been fabulous. Let's cut away to hear from them and their opinion on human evolution. I want to go back to the design of Homo sapien, especially. And some people would argue that we are omnivores and we can eat animals and plants and both, work and are totally fine. I've heard you describe this in the past. Would you agree with that? Are we omnivores?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
There's no question about it. It's like, no. The only problem with that, using the term omnivore, is that we, at the same time, attach to it wrongly unlimited flexibility. So this is not the case with omnivores. The omnivores, for instance, there's a paper that took like 139 or 7, if I remember correctly, mammals, again, terrestrial mammals, and checked their diet and found out that 80% of them are omnivores. So in general, mammals tend to be omnivores. We are not unique in that sense. But if you look at the diet, most of them had 70% or more coming from either plant or from animal. So the conclusion of the people who wrote the paper is that mammals are specialized omnivores. Okay, well, you can be omnivore and you can be specialized. So my assertion is that yes, we are omnivore. I can't deny it. We have the capacity to consume plants, but we could not be so flexible because of what I told you at the beginning, the energetic return. If the energetic return is low, you just cannot be so flexible. You have to get your calories. And you see it in the evolution. You see, for instance, that the large intestine, which really is an organ to consume plants, to get energy from plants. Most plants have very high fiber. And the way to extract energy from that fiber is in the large intestines by bacteria, okay? By the way, the product that you get the energy from is, of course, fat, yeah? A special kind of fat, short-chain fatty acids.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's a fat. So most animals, by the way, get a lot of their energy from fat. Whether from fiber, from bacteria, or from eating fat. So in any case, the evolution of humans, if you take a chimpanzee as like a beginning, we have large intestines that are smaller by 77%, according to my calculations.
Wow.
That of a chimpanzee, the same size, if the chimpanzee had the same size as ours. So you see that the evolution is away from plants. Now you have a disadvantage of from getting plants because you cannot utilize all the energy in the plants.
And now, as promised, we're going to cut away to hear from Dr. Bill Schindler. This is a bit of a longer clip, and I did this deliberately. The discussion will drift away just a little bit from protein, but I think it's really relevant, and he makes some really good points about plant foods versus animal foods, which is something we've covered a little bit in our discussion so far. And I thought Dr. Bill Schindler did such a great job talking about this. He does such a great job illustrating this in his book. Again, it's called Eat Like a Human. So let's hear from him. Like I said, it's going to be a little bit longer of a discussion, but I will think you'll find this relevant.
We have one of the least efficient digestive tracts of any animal on the planet. And it's a huge conversation. I dive into it in depth in the book. But the reality is we are not physically designed to eat most of the foods that we consume today and even in the past. And it's really odd to say that. Wow, what do you mean? We eat all these foods. We've been eating them for hundreds of years or thousands of years or tens of thousands of years. Aren't humans omnivores? Well, yes, humans are omnivores. But not by design, not because we were designed to consume all these foods that we eat, right? We don't have a digestive tract like a cow that is specifically set up to properly digest efficiently and safely tough vegetable materials. We don't have a digestive tract like a goose or a duck or another granivorous bird that's specifically designed to safely and efficiently get the nutrition from things like grains. We don't have any of those things. So, but we are omnivores. How can that be? And we're omnivores by technology because over millions of years, our ancestors created technologies and behaviors and approaches to food to transform it before it touches our lips, to literally get it ready for our incredibly weak and inefficient digestive tract to safely and efficiently make use of that food. That's the key. That's what humans do differently than all other animals, that we process the food when we do it right, properly, before it touches our lips. So, and most of the technologies created over really, and I'm not overstating this at all, almost 3.5 million years, beginning with the first stone tool, these technologies were designed to take a resource that in many cases we have no business consuming, make it safe, make it nutrient dense, and most importantly, make it bioavailable. In other words, make those nutrients available to our digestive tract. So when we consume that food, we're getting the nutrition going to the places it needs to go in our bodies. That's the key. And that's the how part. So that we've been asking this question, what, which is important, which is the same question you just asked me, like, what about the apple? What apples? That's important. And we'll talk about that in a second. But what's really also important to comprehend is that when we do it right, we use technologies to transform those resources into their safest and most nourishing forms possible before we consume them and get them ready for our bodies. That's the cooking piece of it, whether it's cooking or fermenting or slicing or dicing or nixtamalizing or co-eating with different things. That's the thing that we need to bring back into our kitchen. Because I've said in the past 5 minutes the word processing probably a dozen times. And most of us, when we think about food processing, like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. And it is. The way the modern food industry processes food today, most of it is terrible. Most of it is at the expense of safety and nutrient density and nutrient bioavailability. And at its ultimate end result is it's at the expense of our own health. But what it's doing is making other people a whole lot of money, right? But the food processing we need to get back is to make food safe and nourishing as possible. So that's the foundation of it. And the cool thing is all of this is doable in your home kitchen. It doesn't matter if you live in a tiny little flat in New York City or a mansion on top of a mountain in Montana with the most well-outfitted kitchen on the planet. You have you have all the things you need to process that food properly now. Our ancestors are doing it in caves with sticks and rocks and fire and clay pots. We certainly have the things that we need to have already. So as far that how piece is incredibly important. The what piece also is important, and there is a little bit of overlap. So you mentioned the apples, 365 days a year. Well, we think of that as the ability to take produce and make it available all year round as this wonderful thing and this result of modern technology and transportation and shipping and refrigeration and freezing and all that. And the reality is we have never, ever in the history of our species had access to the same vegetable or fruit all year round. It's impossible. And when we come from the mindset that the most nourishing things we can be eating is fruits and vegetables, which is not true. But if that was true, it just follows, the thinking follows is, wow, if some of this is good, more of it's better. So if I can get it 2 weeks out of the year naturally, then if I can get it 365 days a year, because I can get it shipped in from Argentina and Peru and wherever else, and I can have it frozen, then that's even better. But when you dive into it and look more deeply and you understand that, no, we've actually been eating seasonally for millions of years. In fact, hyper seasonally and hyper local for a very long period of time. And we start to realize that while plants have nutrition that is valuable, plants are inherently dangerous, right? And we can talk about this in just a few minutes, but what I mention it now to say, one of the issues that we've caused by making fruits and vegetables the same ones available all year round is we have created a danger in our food system that we're just starting to now realize. We're taking plants, and I'll bring up spinach as an example, plants that have certain toxins in them. In the case of spinach, it's incredibly high in oxalates, that if you ate spinach for the 2 weeks out of the year that it would grow in your area out in a field, then no big deal. But if you take that and eat it literally every single day or every single week, all year round, you're starting to create the toxicity level is going to build up in your bodies, and it's going to cause all sorts of issues. And we're starting to actually realize that today.
Spinach. You're talking about what everybody would ubiquitously consider a healthy food. And we were fortunate enough to have Sally Norton on, and she's obviously an expert in oxalate, and it's absolutely bananas. And people don't consider that seasonality. I've heard you talk about this before, and you've said that plants should scare the hell out of you. What do you mean by that?
That's the opening line of my chapter on plants in the book. Listen, first of all, I just got to say, Sally Norton is fantastic. And I will give her, I will always give her an amazing amount of credit. One conversation with her about oxalates a couple years ago literally changed my life. She is, with the work she's doing, is literally that powerful. And thankfully, she's coming out with a book, and it should be available in just a couple months. And it's going to be, it's going to change lives. So here's the story with plants. First off, we have taken away seasonality in our grocery stores. And the more removed we are from our food system and the longer our food chain is, right? And the more distance we are from our food, the less we have direct access to the knowledge about our food, where it comes from, how it should be prepared, what nourishing forms of it actually are. And the more we start to rely on other people who, some of them certainly have our best interest or our interest at heart, but most of them are trying to make money. And giving up the power of food and nourishment to somebody else is incredibly dangerous. And there's direct marketing campaigns and people in lab coats playing with flavor profiles of food that are there to trick us and make us buy more food and overeat and do all these other sorts of things. And we know this. But one thing that's also a little bit less in your face, but probably even more powerful, is literally what is in the grocery stores. What we see in the grocery stores are subliminal messages to tell us what food is and what food isn't, right? If we were hunter-gatherers and we're out there foraging and hunting every day, and we see the seasons change and we see the animals migrate in and we see this is available then and this plant is not available at this point, it's just, we would naturally recognize this is food, this isn't food. This is food this time of year, this isn't food that time of year because I can't get it at all. But when we go into the grocery store and we see asparagus all year round, and we see apples all year round, and every one of them looks exactly the same, and the eggs are exactly the same size, and then we see chicken breast here, and there's a ton of chicken breast over here, there's a few thighs, and maybe there's a container stuck in the back that has some livers in it, but probably if you see livers in your grocery store, most of the time it's in the bait section for the food. It really, that experience right there shapes how you envision, your foodscape, what you have access to, what food is and what food isn't. Right then and there, you don't see any chicken skin, you don't see any chicken hearts, you don't see any chicken gizzards, you don't see any bones, you don't see any feet, you don't see, misshapen apples, you do see asparagus all year round. You don't see an empty slot where the asparagus is when it's not in season. All of that are, powerful subliminal messages that shape the way you view your food and what a healthy diet should and shouldn't be. So, and that's really, really problematic. So I say the plants should scare the hell out of you because here we're coming in as really uninformed consumers, right? Because our information is coming from the people trying to sell us the food, which is problematic. The people that are stocking the grocery store or deciding where things are stocked in the grocery store, and we're really at a loss from the first moment. We walk into the grocery store, I think many of us, and I know I used to do this, with this idea that plants are incredibly healthy. And you push your shopping cart into the produce section. You say, "Oh my gosh, if I'm going to get healthy, this is the week I'm going to get healthy. This is the week I'm going to make my family healthy." And you look around in the produce section, you're like, "Some of this is good. Everybody tells me that this is all good. So if some of it's good, more of it's even better." And you do one of the most dangerous things when you're deciding how to feed yourself and your family, and you shut your brain off, you shut your filters off, and you just start loading the cart with all kinds of vegetables. And then maybe you move on and get a couple other things. The problem is all plants are toxic, all of them. Every plant on this planet is toxic. And the reason is because plants are trying to do exactly what every other living thing on this planet needs to do to survive: reproduce viable offspring. Now, animals have a lot of ways to defend themselves and make sure that their offspring are viable and can reproduce and are safe and all that. They have claws and teeth and skunks have, smells, and also they can fly. They can do all sorts of things. Plants can't move. Like plants they don't move. So there are some physical defense mechanisms from plants, things like thorns and hard shells on nuts and bark on trees and those sorts of things for sure. But the reality is all plants are engaging in chemical warfare to survive, reproduce viable offspring so they make sure they don't go extinct. Now, some of these toxins are benign. Like they don't do, they're at such low levels, they don't do a whole lot. We don't have to really worry about them. Some of them, like toxins in certain mushrooms, for example, will kill you outright. But most of these toxins, and the ones that we really need to be afraid of, are there and can build up in our bodies over time. And they don't, and they can cause a lot of problems later on, or they cause little tiny problems here and there for a very long period of time until we get hit with it full blown. And the problem with that kind of toxin in plants is that we don't associate it. There's such a distance between the consumption of that plant and the problem associated with it, or it's happening at such a low level for so long that we don't associate the two of those things together. I mean, if we ate a mushroom and was violently ill the next day, then we know, hey, that mushroom made me really sick. But if we're eating spinach, and then we're eating spinach, and then we're eating spinach, and then several months later, we're getting out of bed and, our knees are achy and our feet are, our feet hurt and you're a little bit creaky going up the steps and you're 40 years old. And like, oh, this is just old age. We've kind of normalized these things. You don't associate it, especially because the media is telling us that spinach is amazing for us. I have no idea why we were listening to a cartoon from 50 years ago tell us that spinach was, but we've bought into this. And then we can have all sorts of these issues. So the cool thing or cool isn't the right word. The powerful thing about being a hunter-gatherer, right? Hunter-gatherer ancestors is that they realized that these plants, because they were dealing with them all the time, these plants had toxins in them. And in many cases, they've figured out technologies and approaches to those toxic foods to detoxify them and make them safer to eat. Other ones they just knew to stay away from. Other ones they realized that by default, they didn't even realize that they only had access to it seasonally, right? And all of these, this is what a close connection to your food system can provide you. But now with us going in thinking all vegetables and fruits are incredibly healthy, they're great for you, eat them all year round. Things we've labeled foods as superfoods, which drives me nuts. Spinach being one of them, eat some of them, eat a ton of them, everything's going to be fine. And then we have a huge issue with it. The reality is we need to be scared and respectful of plants. We need to realize that when we consume plants, there are plants that have good nutrition for us, but it always comes at a little bit of a cost. Now, maybe the nutrition or the pleasure we get from eating that outweighs the cost of eating that, whether we're taking in some oxalates or some lectins or some phytates or whatever it is that the problem that plant has. It may outweigh it, but it requires our thinking to decide whether or not it makes sense to eat that. What part of the year should I be eating it? How much should I be consuming of it? And most importantly, what can I do to that plant to make it as safe and nourishing as possible before me or my family eats it? And I know this sounds overwhelming to some people, like, oh my God, this is one more thing for me to think about. And it is, and that's good. I mean, we are sicker than we've ever been as a species right now because of the way we feed ourselves. We can crawl out of this hole, but it takes vigilance. It takes time. It takes work and effort. But I'm telling you, it is such a rewarding journey when you start to feel better. I'm 48 years old. I was a Division I athlete at Ohio State. I wrestled there, and I am 48 years old now, and I'm in the best health of my entire life. I don't care what age you are. It is worth paying attention and taking these steps because it will pay off in droves.
So I really appreciate those two insights from those archaeologists, Dr. Mickey Bendor and Dr. Bill Schindler. I think they've got a really interesting way of looking at things through the glass of evolution. And Dr. Mickey Bendor in particular has done so much research and publications and study about the humans and how we have evolved with different attributes that clearly suggest that we come from a more carnivorous background and that should be our primary fuel source. One paper in particular that he wrote is Are We Carnivores? I believe he released that in 2019, and it talks about all of our different physical attributes. Our ability to run great distances, like endurance running, our ability to throw things indicated that we could hunt in that particular way. Things like our stomach acidity. Our stomachs are extremely acidic, and so that means we can kill off pathogens and bacteria from meat that could have been hunted, even several weeks ago. So I think there's a lot of really strong connections there. I do really like his insight where he says, yes, we are omnivore, but we do specialize. It's not to say that we can do 50% plants and 50% animal products. I believe it suggests that we should primarily be getting our calories and protein and fat from animal products and then supplementing with some plants. And then taking the advice from Dr. Bill Schindler, we need to be very, very careful about the plants that we are eating and how we're preparing them, and remembering that it is our humanness to be able to create technologies and prepare our calories outside of the body, because we don't have the same stomach systems that cows have or other animals that are able to eat grasses, eat cellulose, and turn that into short-chain fatty acids in the stomach. And so I really appreciate those two viewpoints. Let's go back to Dr. Ben Bickman so we can finish out our thoughts on insulin and protein in the diet.
It makes me very curious how people could claim that humans are not omnivores. We are, or even more carnivore than we are herbivore. A human cannot live on plants alone. That is a diet that is incompatible with human survival. Now, someone's saying, well, I know a vegan, or I'm a vegan and I can do it. Veganism, if someone is surviving on it, is a privilege of the elite. This is a person who must know what nutrients they are deficient in, because they will absolutely be deficient in nutrients. So they have to have a sufficient level of education to know that. And second, they have to have a sufficient level of wealth to afford the supplements that they're missing.
That's a really good point.
That is a person who can survive on a vegan diet. So humans are not herbivores. However, you can take a human that is living on nothing but a carnivorous diet, and they will survive perfectly fine. And I mean it. There will be no nutritional deficiencies. So we can live as carnivores, but we can also subsist perfectly fine with plants in our diet. So we are omnivores. We're built that way. And so I think that it's comfortable to just say we're omnivores and leave it at that. But back to your sort of initial sentiment, our ancestors would have certainly enjoyed carbohydrates whenever they could get them. But thankfully, carbohydrates are not essential to the human survival. There are such things as essential fats. There are such things as essential amino acids, and we get them all in any source of animal foods. And there is no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. Nothing, zero, zilch. There's absolutely nothing essential about it. All this focus on polyphenols and plant metabolites like resveratrol and whatever, that's all fun. That's all neat stuff. But humans do not need it to survive. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't eat them, therefore. I'm not saying that. But I am saying, I guess, don't let that be the focus of your diet. The one macronutrient that is not essential and coincidentally happens to have the biggest effect on insulin. Focus on the two macronutrients that are essential and coincidentally have the least effect on insulin.
I thought it was really important to hear from both men and women in this discussion of protein intake. So now we are going to go to Nikki Krendel, who is a dietetic student studying in Australia. She follows a carnivore diet, as you can hear in our episode that we did with her. That was back in 225 for health reasons, which is really interesting. She is a very, very smart person who is really interested in the science behind eating and protein intake and strength training and everything. So we're going to hear from her. We're going to start out listening to her respond to why strength training is so important. So again, this isn't exactly starting out with protein, but it's very much related and very relevant, and so I thought we'd throw that in. She's also going to discuss the difference between animal proteins and plant proteins, which we discussed a little bit, and she's going to give her opinion there also on intake. I want to talk about, for sure, building muscle, why that is so important. I know it's a passion of yours, but let's start with the why. Why is muscle and muscle mass so important?
Well, as you get older, we do tend to not be able to maintain muscle as easily. We become a little bit insensitive to the growth factors around muscle building. So, yeah, that's a bit annoying. But I think if you provide it with enough stimulus and the right amount of protein, you can maintain and build muscle as you get older. I don't think that means that you can't build muscle anymore. I think it's important for several reasons. I think for the obvious one is metabolism. I mean, muscle is such a massive energy sink. So the more muscle that you have, the more metabolically active it is, and it takes a lot of energy to just hold on to that muscle. To just have it there is metabolically very taxing for the body. So when it comes to staying lean and or losing weight, I think it's very, very important to have as much muscle on your body as you can, because then basically just sitting there, you're burning more calories than you would if you didn't have muscle. I think as you age, it's important because imagine that you're an elderly person and you don't have any muscle around your bones and you fall over and you put your arm out to stop yourself. Muscle is one of the things that can shock absorb. It stops your bones from just being bone on floor and snapping. So I think muscle is very, very important particularly as you get quite elderly. So yeah, I just think having a lot of muscle on you is it really, really improves your insulin sensitivity. It's one of the best things that you can do for your health, I think.
Yeah, totally agree. One of the components of building muscle is getting protein intake, and I can get protein from animal foods, but I could also get protein from things like beans or grains or whatever. What is the difference between plant proteins versus animal proteins?
So we have 20 amino acids, and 9 of them are essential. And animal foods are the only ones that can give you the essential amino acids. They're the amino acids that we can't create in our body. We have to get them from our food. So you very, very, very quickly can become deficient in protein. And interestingly, there is one, my favorite amino acid is called leucine, and it is one of the essential amino acids. You cannot get that from plant foods. And it is actually essential for building muscle. So you need to, in order to stimulate muscle protein synthesis, you need a certain amount of leucine, which is about 2 to 3 grams, and that will stimulate muscle protein synthesis. So the problem with plant foods is that it does provide protein, but they are not the protein, they are not the amino acids that we truly, truly need in order to build muscle.
I'm so glad you wanted to talk about leucine. How many grams of animal protein does it take to get enough leucine to trigger muscle protein synthesis or building muscle?
Yep. So we're looking at about 2 to 3 grams of leucine, and you get that from, it does depend on the leanness versus the fattiness of the meat. Obviously, the fattier the meat is, then the less muscle meat you'd have within that piece. So you would need to have more in order to get the amount of protein. So I would say about 200 to 250 grams of protein gives you 2 to 3 grams of leucine. So I see it as a 250 gram piece of steak or a 200 gram piece of chicken. As I said, the leaner you go on the animal meat, the more protein you get per gram. So that's probably just made it even more confusing. But if you go, say, chicken breast, you could probably do about 200 grams. If you're going something like ribs, you'd probably need more, 250 to 300 grams to get the same amount.
Yeah, that's very well explained. If I'm like trying to picture this like visually, would we say like maybe like 2 of the palm of your hand type kind of size would be about the ballpark that you would want? Again, it depends on the type, but do you think visually that would be a good way to think about it?
That's exactly what I usually go for. So if I go for two palms of mine. That's what I would go for in a meal.
That's great. About how much protein do you recommend daily for most people?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, and I'm still trying to find the answer to that. I wouldn't go under one gram per pound. Hang on. Now I get myself confused because it's often in pounds and kilograms. I personally, so I'm about 105 pounds, and I go for about 100 grams. So yeah, one gram per pound. I wouldn't go under that. I would say that's the base.
Gotcha. 1 gram per pound as the low level. I mean, think about that compared to the recommendations that were given. That's absurd.
It is absurd. It is absurd. That should be the base. And then if you're active, I would definitely go way over that. Really, I mean, look, we all get very worried about kidney health when it comes to protein. But from what I've read, kidney health improves as protein consumption increases. I've heard people say that it's like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. I haven't seen any problems in the research with kidney health and protein. I just haven't seen it. So I think you can just go as high as your satiety levels ask you to, I guess. For me, some days I want more, some days I want less, but I usually would not go under about 100 grams a day.
These next two clips are going to focus specifically on protein recommendations on ketogenic diets. This is something that we get asked about all the time. And so the next two clips are going to address those things directly, although the two guests will have differing opinions. And so we're just going to leave them both here for you so that you can decide how you want to approach this. We are first going to learn from Tyler Cartwright, who's been in the keto world for a very, very long time. And he's going to address here the idea of limiting protein, whether or not that's a really good idea. And then we'll go to Robert Sykes, who is the Keto Savage and runs the Keto Savage podcast. So many people were really afraid of protein and really wanted to keep the protein low, but were having issues with muscle mass or maybe over-consuming fats. Can you tell us a little bit about what you were noticing as far as your recommendations along the lines of protein and low carbohydrate?
So there was a time when Dr. Atkins used to say, eat liberally from all fish and fowl, right? Like he wasn't constraining protein, nor was he really constraining fat. He was also known for saying, I'm not saying calories don't count. I'm saying don't count calories. And I think that he was trying to bring forward an idea to people that eating a more satiating diet really would sort of self-restrict or self-limit the amount of calories that you were actually consuming in a day. You just didn't really need to do those things in order to have at least some early successes. Somewhere along the line, and I'm not entirely sure when the switch flipped, but I have some suspicions, but they're people in the community and I respect them enough to, too much to call them out too badly. But there just started to be this narrative that you could overeat protein and it would kick you out of ketosis. And I'm sure this will be audio only, so I'm using air quotes around those expressions. So there's a little bit of snark intended here. But the problem is, while that may be true, the amount that would be necessary would be so astronomically high that it didn't make any sense. And so what we found was that people were sort of intentionally limiting protein. And there was this narrative that you got to eat fat to lose fat. And so they were, anytime that people would stall in a diet, their answer was just, I'm going to go chug more fat, or I'm going to go, it's a little cliche, but, throw a stick of butter on the side of the plate and eat that stick of butter with my eggs or whatever. And every time I think about that, I pray for my toilet. Like that just sounds like a terrible, terrible way to live life. But there just became this narrative. And then people started really getting wrapped around the axle of like the 3-to-1 ratio and the 4-to-1 ratio stuff that exists out there. And they somehow took that data, which was intended to look at the caloric composition of a diet, the energy of the diet, and say 3-to-1 is a ratio of energy or 4-to-1 is a ratio of energy. And they transmuted that in some way. My guess is because they'd never read the research and they didn't think about it, to mass. And so they started saying that, like, if I was going to have 100 grams of protein, I would have to have 300 grams of fat or 400 grams of fat. They really got married to these ratios. And, we would get people showing up in the community saying, I'm already eating a 70-30, or 70-25-5 diet. Why am I not losing weight? And I'm like, hey, great, that's ratios. Is that of 10,000 calories a day or 1,000 calories a day? Well, I don't know. Here's a guess of what I'm eating in the course of a day. I'm like, well, unfortunately, it's kind of that which isn't measured can't be managed. I can't really give you any insight there. But I see the switch that flipped, and that switch that flipped was people didn't think about the fact that a gram of fat has about 9 calories per gram versus protein. So you're already at 4 calories. So you're already at over 2 times the energy composition, even at a 1-to-1 by mass. And so realistically, if you go to like a 1.5-to-1 by mass, you're already at a 3-to-1 as an energy composition, a little more, almost 4-to-1. So you start to kind of it's a little bit of, there's a frustration that happens, but then there's also this empathy that sort of comes in to go, man, I have missed it on so many different things. It's hard for me to be mad at somebody or upset, but trying to correct that narrative has been a life's work at this point, I think, just trying to help people, because the biggest challenge, and I think Luis nailed it when he said that eating protein and building muscle mass now is like a savings account for your retirement age or your elderly years. Because when you get to be 50, 60, 70, putting on even a pound of lean mass is basically blessing from the fate or whatever, because it's almost impossible to do outside of those early sort of newbie gains where you might get a few pounds before it shuttles off. The best thing that people can do is be eating enough protein and training and exercising now to build that up. And they just were restricting protein because the narrative was, if you're not losing, you're either eating too little fat or too much protein. And so they would shift the balance again. And it broke my heart because the data really doesn't support any of those claims. And, when we look at those things, those ratios didn't exist for fat loss diets. They existed for intractable epilepsy. Those diets were used for juvenile cases of epileptic disorders that did not respond well, like refractory epilepsy, where they didn't respond well to medication, like pharmacologic intervention. And so they would give these diets based on these ratios. But when you look at the outcomes data for those children that went through those things, they were stunted in size. They had less muscle mass than their peers. They tended to have shorter lifespans. And that's a sad thing until you realize that you dance with the devil. You know that this can help control seizure disorders. That's going to help prolong brain activity, brain life. It's going to help to live a more robust life. You accept the consequences of this are less detrimental than the consequences of that. But to take that data and try and extrapolate that to a non-epileptic person who's simply trying to lose body mass or lose body fat, or to take that data and, another good example is like take data from type 1 diabetics and apply it to non-diabetics or to type 2 diabetics even, doesn't make any sense. It's like taking rodent studies with blind faith and applying them to people without actually testing that data. And I think that's really what happened. I think a lot of people just got, and I hate to use the term scared of protein because that sounds ridiculous, but they started to see it as the cause of their lack of fat loss rather than the single best thing they could be eating.
So that was one opinion about protein recommendations on a ketogenic diet. So let's now go to Robert Sykes from Keto Savage so that he can give us his opinion as well. Let's talk about some of the other macronutrients, especially protein. How important is protein in your diet, and what kind of numbers are you typically targeting for yourself, but also your clients?
Yeah, so protein's super important. Like protein, it's interesting because as the keto space has evolved over the years, I've seen it in which, everybody was avoiding protein for risk of gluconeogenesis, and they assumed that protein would turn into chocolate cake once it entered your bloodstream. Not the case. And now the opposite end of the spectrum, the pendulum has swung so far that people are prioritizing protein to the point that they're minimizing fat unnecessarily, and they're basically giving protein this golden halo, and it can do no wrong. You can't overconsume protein is what they're suggesting. As is true with most things, the answer lies somewhere in the middle. You need protein. You absolutely want to have protein to repair and build more muscle tissue. It's incredibly important to macronutrient, but not at the expense of enough dietary fat, because that's where you're getting your energy. You can make energy with little dietary fat, little carbohydrates through protein alone via gluconeogenesis, but that shouldn't be your prioritized and your preferred form of energy production because it's not an efficient process. So it's going to be different for everybody. I mean, one's own personal energy expenditures are going to dictate things. How much muscle they're carrying is going to have an effect. There's a lot of variables at play as to how much protein a person should consume. But a good general rule of thumb for most people is if you're consuming about a gram of protein per pound of lean mass, or 1.5 grams of protein per pound of lean mass, you can certainly get things dialed in and be pretty healthy around that intake.
Okay, so 1.5 grams per pound of lean mass. I love that recommendation. A lot of people would say, wow, that is way too high. You're going to cause damage to the kidneys or the liver or all kinds of crap that I hear people say about over-consuming protein. How would you respond to that?
There's just not really any literature that suggests that over-consuming protein is going to be damaging to the kidneys, especially if you're taking in enough total calories and enough dietary fat. I mean, if you're 150-pound individual and you're taking in 400 grams of protein, that's unnecessary. That may be damaging, but who in the world would want to consume 400 grams of protein? That's a lot of chicken breast and tilapia, and that's just no fun at all. But if you're consuming about 1 gram per pound of lean mass, 1.5 grams per pound of lean mass, you're active, you're working out, you're hiking, or burning some calories, then yeah, taking in that amount is going to be super healthy, totally within that normal healthy range. It's going to allow you to build muscle and recover. You shouldn't have any issues in that regard.
Yeah, that's great. I've heard you answer this before, and I find this really interesting, and I see a really strong argument on either side. You have shifted from eating several meals a day to eating a few meals a day that are more, more volume. You're eating a lot more when you're eating those meals. People make the argument that you need to get at least 30 to 40 grams of protein, somewhere in that ballpark, to get enough leucine to trigger muscle protein synthesis. And you want to trigger that a lot of times. So that's the argument to say, like, you do want to have, multiple meals in a day, more meals in a day to be able to get that much protein, to have that trigger, tripped every few hours to always be in muscle protein synthesis, where, I've heard you talk about this in the past, again, like having, less meals, but having more volume and getting enough protein is totally adequate to be able to achieve that. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So I think I haven't seen any compelling research that suggests that if you don't eat every 3 or 4 hours, that you're leaving much muscle growth potential on the table. If you're consuming enough total dietary protein intake, then you should be totally fine in that regard. I mean, you have to worry so much about hitting that anabolic window that we all feared, way back in the day. I mean, I would literally go crazy if I didn't have a protein shake within 20 minutes of working out, assuming that I was just, all my gains were for naught.
Waste of time.
Yeah. It's not the way it works. I mean, if you're taking in enough protein, enough calories, over the course of a 24-hour period, then you should be totally fine in regards to building the muscle, recovering from the training session. So I wouldn't really worry too much in that regard. Again, you want to make sure you're consuming enough protein in that window, but I mean, it takes some time to digest and assimilate those nutrients. So it's not like it's going to be dissipated instantly. I mean, especially if you're following a ketogenic diet, in which case the fat that you're ideally pairing with that protein slows the digestion and the absorption of that fat. So that's also another key factor.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. The company I used to work with used to make us wear, I remember for some promotional period, like Optimized by 45, which basically we were told, like, if you didn't get your shake in within 45 minutes of your workout, it's like we said, it was completely worthless. And over the years, you kind of learn, like, oh, wait, no, this is just a great way to sell a bunch of protein shakes down in the cafe when people are done with their workouts. Probably not that necessary.
Yeah, really good marketing, though.
Great marketing for sure. So I wanted to include those two different insights just so you could be thinking about different ways to approach things. I think Tyler and Robert would agree on so many different things, but it just seemed to me like they had a slightly different way of thinking about things, where I believe Tyler was more in favor of having a high protein diet and not really worrying about getting too much protein, where Robert was maybe a little bit more concerned about making sure that the fat content was there. I think both points are valid, and I'm just going to jump in here and play an exclusive clip. So this is another clip that has not appeared on any of our podcasts. We're going to go to Dr. Anthony Chafee, and we're going to hear his opinion on how to manage the protein to fat ratios. And he makes things really easy. And I honestly kind of agree with him when I think about these things. I feel like the more we follow his advice, our bodies just kind of sort things out for themselves, and we don't need to track things very tightly. And so let's go to that exclusive clip. Again, this is not found anywhere else, and let's see what his opinion is.
So if you eating until you're really full is meeting your body's energy expenditure.
Thank you.
And so, that's your body knows better than you do. So, I calculated this and this is what I'm going to need. You do not know your biochemistry better than your biochemistry knows itself. And so, your body will ask for a certain amount of energy, and it'll just say, yep, that's how much I want. When I'm working out more, I literally want double the amount of meat that I normally eat. And when I'm not doing anything, when I'm sedentary, like it just goes down. Like I don't need as much. When I was carrying extra body fat, early on, like it's just, I didn't eat some days at all, even though I worked out for 6 hours. My body's just like, no, you're good, fatty. Like just put the steak down. So, that was weird for me too, because I'm like, no, I have to eat because I worked out for 6 hours today and I'm going to work out for 6 hours tomorrow. Like I have to eat now because I have to have that energy. But obviously I had enough energy stored in my fat tissue, my adipose tissue to last 2 months. At a high level, so, that's obviously not the case. And so that was a lesson I had to learn as well, but it's like, it's absolutely the case. No, you just eat and your body takes care of the rest.
Perfect. Yeah. So I spent most of my career working on a metabolic cart. And so we would measure resting metabolic rate, which is the whole reason I found low carb and keto and carnivore to begin with. These people would come in and say they were fasting and their metabolic rates would be hundreds of calories higher than what it should have been based on the demographic. Yeah. You have no idea the variance that we would see with the people that we would actually physically measure versus where their equation was. And that is only assuming that day, that 20-minute average that I took, that, whatever conditions, if they followed the protocol exactly, it's still just an assumption. We're still just extrapolating data. There's no way to tell. And then you guess energy expenditure on top of that and exercise on top of that. And it's like, we're making huge guesses, even using very expensive and, really complicated equipment to validate this stuff. There's no way to know.
Yeah, and that's really cool. I didn't know that you had that background, but that's a cool way of looking at it. You're just like, look, hey, these people, their bodies work better, their metabolism's working better. Like there must be something to that. And you're bang on, because there is. When you go into, you stop eating carbohydrates, your basal metabolic rate jumps up by average of 250 kilocalories. You know what I mean? So it's just like, people say, so calories in, calories out. It's like, you have no idea how many calories you are putting out in a day. You may be able to sort of roughly figure how many you're taking in. You have no clue how many you're putting out. And what you put in designates and dictates how much you put out as well, based on what metabolic state you're in and based on a number of different factors. But, if you have adipose tissue, your body's not going to want to use what you're taking in. It's going to want to dump that out. But if you're not eating enough, you're telling your body that we're in a famine time and, we got to store onto this. So it lowers your metabolic state down and lowers your metabolic rate.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so you actually find that people, when they're restricting, they're calorie restricting, even on a carnivore diet, they'll sort of not have the greatest results. And then all of a sudden they just say, you know what, screw it. I'm just going to eat what my body wants. And all of a sudden, then they start losing weight. They're eating more calories and they're losing more weight. Why is that? If it's calories in, calories out, that can't work. So it's not calories in, calories out. Clearly, because that is what happens. And, there are some people, but very few, who sort of, listen to their bodies and actually put on weight. Most of those people will come around and turn around though, and
because
they'll
the metabolism
eventually
comes up, it speeds up and starts burning off excess.
Yeah. And so, and the thing is too, is like, some people, for whatever reason are, going to put on weight for a little while, but it all comes full circle. And then eventually they start losing weight and they actually don't even want to eat as much.
These next two clips I'm going to play are both going to be pretty brief. I made a last-minute decision to include these in this episode because I thought it was a really interesting angle. And these were actually two different interviews that I did actually just this week. So this first clip is going to be with Rob Stewart. He is a skin health expert. You can follow him on Instagram at StewartRobStewart. He works with low carbohydrate and carnivore diets to help people with all kinds of skin issues like eczema and rosacea. And, we got talking about protein, and I thought it was a really interesting conversation that we can add here and more on the angle of skin health. After that, we're going to hear from Dr. Karen Zinn. She's out of New Zealand, and she wrote a book called What the Face, which is all about low carbohydrate diets and skin health. So we're going to play these two clips now. Where do you put the focus with people? Do you get better skin health results by focusing on fat or focusing on protein?
Probably protein, to be honest with you. The fats, like I said, are extremely important, but with most people, You just have to get the amount of fats that will produce the alchemy that is needed to be healthy, for your brain and for your hormones and for everything else. Also, if you're not getting saturated fats and cholesterol, then you're probably not going to ever get vitamin D from the sun. So you have to get enough fat no matter what. But what I see is the people who don't eat enough protein across the board struggle. But my clients that just undereat their protein or have an aversion to it, they're the hardest ones to figure out that puzzle piece. With the protein high and the fat high, what I've seen comparatively to high carb is that the healing of the biomarkers, meaning your sleep, your testosterone, your sex drive, your ability to articulate words, your overall sense of well-being and your mood, your creativity, your athletic ability, skyrocket extremely fast, like faster, like surprisingly fast. Even when I went through it, it was just like, man, I was an athlete my entire life and I'm getting gains like I'm kind of on steroids. And the other hand, a high carb that just doesn't happen.
Yeah, totally. Well, we're so glad that you prioritize protein. That's something we've definitely learned along the way as well. How do you think about collagen protein as either something that needs to be in the diet or something that needs to be supplemented?
I think for me, I try to be open-minded to everything. And I definitely don't come from the school of, I know what's best. I come from the school as I'm got my white belt on and I'm traveling around to different dojos, getting my ass kicked so I can learn. And what I've found is kind of across the board with my clients, I steer them away from anything powder, anything related to supplementation, not because it doesn't have its place, but because it's like, it's kind of like focusing on trying to throw a curveball before you can pick up baseball. First, pick up the baseball, then be able to throw the baseball, then be able to throw that fastball. Then down the line, the curveball will come. It's kind of more of also, what are the behaviors that will take you to where you need to go? And the behaviors are eat animal-based, work out daily, sleep well, and get in the sun. And we're going to start there with everybody. Now, does collagen, the nutrient collagen and collagen peptides, have a place in healing the skin? Oh, for sure. Definitely. They're one of the most magic nutrients there is for skin health. That's why there's a whole industry built around supplementation of them, for sure. But I think getting them from whole food natural sources definitely is the way to go, especially at first. Now let's talk about someone who has been consistent with their diet. They're getting a full spectrum of different animal foods and animal proteins and animal fats, and they're hitting everything, but something's lacking. That's when I will reach for collagen peptides in powder form or pill form, or possibly things like liver supplements or organ meat supplements to round out nutrient profile and allow people to actually get what they need. And also, there's a big behavioral component to all of this. Some people, at the end of the day, just won't be able to eat the great foods all the time. And for those people, supplementation is probably going to be something that they'll have to use as a crutch, and works way better than the alternative.
So that was Rob Stewart. Again, he's a skin health expert, and now we're going to hear from Dr. Karen Zinn, who is the co-author of What the Face. What are some of the most beneficial foods that people can be eating for skin health?
I think it's the template of that whole food. So looking at good quality proteins, I mean, you look at the building blocks of the skin. You've got your collagen, elastin. You've got your three kind of sister proteins there that are really, really important for building optimal skin health. So good quality protein and enough protein. And I think, like I said earlier, protein doesn't really get it doesn't get the press it should do. I think in the old days we were so focused on, bodybuilders eat too much protein, so bad for the system, bad for the kidney, and bad for the whatever. And we've gone the other way, and particularly in the beginning with the whole ketogenic diet, you need to keep your protein intake low. But that has moved really, and now we're seeing a push towards optimal protein. Protein has got that added benefit of improving satiety. So good quality protein sources are really important for building healthy skin, but also the fats, particularly the omega-3 fats. So we talk a lot about the omega-3, omega-6 ratio, and something to avoid being seed oils because they've got high omega-6, and you've got, there's some issues there with the ratio, but also they're kind of factory manufactured fats. So again, focusing on animal sources, but also plant sources as well of omega-3 fats. And so the fat and the protein were two major focuses, but also the micronutrients as well. And this might be a bit kind of antagonistic for the carnivore folk, but we do go into the importance of certain nutrients like biotin, and some of the other kind of lesser well-known micronutrients, and how important they are for optimal skin health and gut health.
Wow. No, that's great. You are the second person we've interviewed this week that is an expert in skin health and has told us that protein is the most important thing, and make sure you're getting adequate protein. Somebody sent me an article. It's so ridiculous. Somebody sent me an article this week and said, hey, what do you think about this? And it was called something like the 7 signs that you're eating too much protein. And there were all like these ridiculous symptoms that I've never heard of, and was recommending for most adults they need to take in about, I think it said like 53 grams of protein per day, and to like sub out things like, get the animal fats out, get the animal protein out, make sure you're eating plenty of soy. Like, oh my goodness, like I cannot believe what I'm reading out there as far as protein goes. Shocking. That message has to die.
Absolutely. And I think, that whole, the RDI or the RDA of 0.8 grams per kilogram body weight. So if you're weighing, if you're weighing, I don't know, 60 kilos, that's sort of 50 odd grams of protein. I mean, I get that in my breakfast meal.
Absolutely.
And I think that that is way too low. And, you only have to look at the powerlifting literature and the bodybuilding, well, not so much the bodybuilding, but the literature that looks at strength training individuals, where they've done those studies and they've got the protein up to either 4.4, I think even 5.4 grams of protein per kilogram. So, someone who's 80 or 90 kilos, multiply that by 5.4, that's a lot of protein. Yeah. And I'm not saying that's an amount that I would tell people to eat, but the literature has looked at a range of health markers and have found that there is no insult to any of these markers with such high levels of protein. So it is a real myth. And I think there is some issues if you do have, you've got pre-existing issues with your kidneys, you might think a little bit harder about it. You might get some help to not go that high, but I think in the general population we need to not be scared of going up to 2 grams of protein per kilogram body weight, because also there's a discrepancy of the weight that you are now versus the weight that you want to be if you want to lose excess body fat. So I know in your neck of the woods, you tend to do it per pound of lean body mass. Yeah. Well, you have to know what your lean body mass is, and the average individual doesn't. So, but anyway, bringing it back, I do think that that protein needs to be on the front stage a little bit more.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you so much. We just always love reiterating that message. I replied to this person like, this is a great way to make sure that you're going to waste muscle and have bone issues and end up in a nursing home at age 65, 70. Like that's where you're heading if you're eating that kind of thing. So this is the last clip that we are going to play that is coming from Boundless Body Radio, and we're going to go all the way back to episode 46 with Fred Hahn. Fred Hahn is an absolute OG when it comes to health and fitness. He has been getting a lot of things right for a very, very long time when it comes to building muscle and maintaining muscle, being very, very fit. He is well into his 50s and looks absolutely incredible. He's such a great guy to follow. I highly recommend following him. But we're going to get his thoughts on protein and also explore the context of fasting, which I find very, very interesting interesting, and we will definitely cover fasting more in depth in a future episode of Boundless Body Premium Podcast. We cannot state enough how important it is to build muscle. One thing we haven't even talked about is all the other things that strength training accomplishes, like bone density or, better connective tissue. Like there's so many other benefits we haven't even scratched the surface on, let alone the muscle mass that you need to do those activities and do them well in the context of the skill that you want to go perform.
Right. Strength training improves cardiovascular health, as we mentioned, through the increased mitochondria. It increases bone density. It actually raises your HDL. There's good research on that. It improves blood pressure, enhances joint flexibility, increases muscle endurance, decreases low back pain, neck pain, arthritis. It controls your blood sugar because you have more muscle fibers. You have more cells to put the sugar in.
Yep.
It increases your lean tissue. It accelerates your metabolic rate. It decreases abdominal fat. It actually also improves mood, cognitive function. It's just, it is by far and away the single most potent form of exercise anybody can engage in. And I tell people, look, I'm not saying don't do your aerobics or whatever it is you enjoy, but strength training must be part of your life. And if it is, anything you love to do, yoga, Pilates, running, it doesn't matter what it is, anything is going to get better.
I love that. I completely agree with that statement. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
You mentioned carbohydrates. Another thing that most people think they know is that you absolutely need carbohydrates to build muscle. Do you need carbohydrates in your diet to build muscle?
No, you don't need any carbohydrates at all. In fact, protein is what builds muscle. Carbohydrates don't build muscle. Carbohydrates are used for energy. The analogy I give clients is, think of fat and protein. Let's say you want to build a house. You have to hire workers. Fat and protein are like the expert. They're like the plumbers and the carpenters are coming in to build and fix things. Whereas carbohydrates is like the lazy teenager lying on the couch. It's just waiting around to do something, but it doesn't actually do anything unless it's used for energy. So when bodybuilders use carbohydrates, they use it to put more or less water in the muscle, because that's how intramuscular glycogen, sugar, carbohydrate, get in and out of the muscle through a water molecule. So it's sort of like when you dehydrate steak to have jerky. It's the same amount of protein in the jerky, it's just there's no water. So water gets in and out of intramuscular sugars get in and out of the muscle through a molecule of water. So carbohydrates don't build muscle. And if you eat adequate protein, through a process called gluconeogenesis, any amount of blood sugar that is necessary is produced from the conversion of the protein you eat to sugar. So you can absolutely build muscle and strength without eating any carbohydrate at all. Now, if you do eat some, what'll happen is and I think Dr. Volek and Finney and some of the other experts in the field have tested and measured on a zero carbohydrate ketogenic diet. Your body will decrease the total amount of water within the muscle, intramuscular water, glycogen, up to about 60%. And then it halts. And then it shifts to fat burning. And, that's ketogenesis. And so you start using fat as the main source of fuel rather than glycogen. But it spares a certain amount of glycogen within the muscle at about 50, 60% or so. I think I'm getting that right. And now, all of a sudden you say, the heck with it, I'm going to eat a pizza. Now, of course, where's all that blood sugar? Where's all that sugar going to go? The first thing it's going to do is get shoved into your muscle cells. And that's why, if you've been low carbohydrate for a while and then you eat carbohydrate, all of a sudden you get swollen. Like you can feel your muscles just swelling up because all of the blood sugar is being put into the muscle cells. And once the muscle cells are full, then it's going to go in, then it's going to convert to a lipid and be put into the fat cells. But you do not need any carbohydrate whatsoever to build strength and muscle mass.
Fred Hahn is such a badass. I really love his approach, and we're going to continue listening to him as the discussion shifts just a little bit over to fasting, which I think is super interesting, and I do think it will definitely change protein intake recommendations. We've been saying through this episode that you really should be getting about 1 gram per pound of lean body weight, or 1 gram per pound of what you think your ideal body weight is as far as intake of protein per day. And fasting is a really interesting thing that puts a little bit of a caveat to that. When your body starts fasting, you enter into a phase called autophagy, where your body is literally eating itself and is recycling things in the body, including proteins. And that can really throw people off as far as recommendations for daily protein intake. From what I have noticed personally, I think it greatly reduces the amount of protein that somebody needs to intake in a day. And so if it feels like you have started time-restricted eating, you started fasting, you're now skipping meals because you're not that hungry, I don't think you necessarily need to go out and try to get the same amount of protein, just due to the fact that your body is going to be recycling the proteins in the body. And one thing to be really clear about, when we're talking about protein, we're talking about lots of different things in the body, not just muscle mass. I really have not come across anybody who has done time-restricted eating or fasting, as long as they do it in a smart way, that makes them lose muscle. It's not something I've ever seen using body fat scales and skeletal muscle mass scales. Anecdotally, it's just not something that happens because the body is so good at recycling its own proteins. And again, that's coming from lots of places, including skin. It's really interesting if you look at before and after pictures online of people that have lost tremendous amounts of weight by using fasting, they really don't look like they have been fat at all in their after picture. And I believe that's because the skin is remaining really tight and going back to its original form, which again, I accredit that to autophagy. Super interesting stuff. A lot of people think of gluconeogenesis as a swear word, right? Like your body, when it doesn't have the carbohydrates it needs, it has to make them through protein. And people think protein, so then they think muscle. And those two are different things. And if your body is using fat and ketones as fuel, you don't even need a lot of gluconeogenesis anyway. And
that's right.
And you learned the benefit of fasting. And so I really want to talk to you about like what you learned when you started fasting, because this is very counterintuitive for a lot of people. And this took me a long time to really get a good understanding of. I was using a metabolic cart for years, measuring people's metabolic rates. And I would tell them, you have to eat X amount of calories or your metabolism is going to tank. And I started noticing this thing where people would try low carb diets or they would try fasting and their metabolic rate would be through the roof. And they would be happy and healthy and they're not that hungry and they feel great. And they're looking at me saying like, I can't eat that many calories unless you want me to eat Twinkies. What do you want me to do? Like, how did you come to the understanding of how beneficial fasting was, what autophagy is, and how that helps with gluconeogenesis?
Well, I'm going to give almost all the credit to Dr. Jason Fung and the work that he has done and his colleagues and the book that he wrote on, it's his first book on fasting. If I walk into the other room and go get it, I could, but it's his first book on fasting. And I started to read the research on it. And what really struck me as I was getting older was that the research that I was reading and what Dr. Fung talked about was that true fasting is very different from starving. When you're fasting, you are not starving. The processes are very different. And when you fast for a long enough period of time, and I think Dr. Fung and the other experts, minimum 16 hours, more towards the 18-hour mark, you're actually increasing growth hormone. And I thought to myself as an aging guy, whoa, I'm never going to take exogenous growth hormone. But if I could find a way to somehow manipulate my diet to increase my growth hormone, then maybe I'd be able to build a little bit more muscle than I have now. So I decided to do an experiment. And so, and the autophagy part is, so when you're really not eating anything and you are fasting properly, autophagy is the process where your body cleans up its junk proteins. It sort of like sweeps up, it gobbles up the damaged, junky proteins and actually seeks out the carbs inside the fat cell. So it's like it goes around like Sherlock Holmes, seeking out all of that stuff and using that as a source of protein. That's why you don't lose muscle tissue, because your body, when you're fasting, because of the process of autophagy. I decided to do an experiment because I had the InBody 570 machines that I had just purchased, and I wanted to see, and it measures your total body water, and I'd be able to see if the benefits of fasting would actually occur. And I doubled down on it and went to a MRI imaging facility where I got my body composition tested with the DEXA. So that is like the gold standard, basically, where it's radiation. But these days, it's very, very, it's no more radiation than flying in an airplane somewhere. And it measured my bone mass, fat mass, and muscle mass. So I did the DEXA scan, and then I measured myself on my InBody device, and it was pretty close to being identical within just a couple of points. Then for the next 3 months, I fasted 18 to 20 hours every day, black coffee, water, not a calorie went in my mouth for minimally 16, mostly 18 hours. And then I had 2 meals a day, and I met my protein requirements of about 150 grams of protein. I did that for 3 months. I went back and got tested on the DEXA, and I tested myself on the InBody machine. No differences in my weightlifting. Exact same slow burn routine, increasing the weights where I needed to, but no different. And I had lost, I have the data right here. I lost, my body fat percent went from 18.1% to 9.4%. My total fat mass was 30.4, and it went to 14.8. Now here's the cool part. My lean mass was 131, and it went to 136. Even my bone mass increased. My percent of lean tissue went from 77% to 86.3. And I had lost, my body weight went from 168.5 to 158.5. So I had lost 10 pounds of body fat and gained 6 pounds of lean mass by fasting for 18 to 20 hours a day, meeting my protein requirements when I ate at the age of like 56.
Wow.
So that was like, well, there you go. Something had to have happened.
How many people, how many trainers would tell you that is not possible? You can't do that.
Right. They would say it's impossible. That's baloney. And I'm like, well, you read the data. And the physician so when you get the test, you sit down with the doctor afterwards and he says, okay, this is what your results mean. The same doctor did my before and after. And when he saw the after, he's looking at it, and he just looks at me and he goes, what are you doing? I said, well, and I explained it to him. He goes, first of all, at your age, you have the lowest amount of visceral fat and fat mass. Only one other person I've ever come in contact with was in better shape than you, and it was a 22-year-old triathlete. And he was barely in better shape than you. What kind of exercise? I mean, I lift weights 20 minutes twice a week. He's like, no. I'm like, yeah, that's what kind of aerobics? I'm like, none. He said, what? I said, none, zero, none. I sit on my 56-year-old butt and I do nothing. And then I explained to him the ketogenic low carb approach to eating while fasting for a minimum of 16, more like 18 to 20 hours a day. And he was just mind blown.
I was going to say his head exploded, I'm sure.
Yeah, he thought I was lying, but I wasn't.
As we are starting to wrap up this premium podcast episode all about protein, I wanted to give you some more exclusive content. So this does not appear anywhere else on Boundless Body. This is something that we took exclusively through interviews that have never been released. So we're going to go now to Dr. Anthony Chafee. He is the plant-free MD. He practices down in Perth, Australia. I absolutely love his podcast. It's a really great one to follow if you're interested in the carnivore diet or interested in getting all plants out of your diet and just having animal products and meat in the diet. We're going to get his opinion on how much protein is appropriate, and then we're going to go back to Michelle Hearn so we can get her closing opinion as well on how much protein we need to be including in the diet.
Well, I mean, protein is the building blocks of most of the structures in our body. Collagen is amino acids bound together very tightly, and and that's the major structural components of our body. Just to name one, protein is very, very important. We need this to replenish and rebuild, remodel, and maintain the physical structure of our bodies. And so you're not getting enough protein, your body's going to start breaking down. Or you get, if you get, poor quality proteins, you're going to have problems as well. There's genetic diseases such as Marfan's and Ehlers-Danlos, where this is a collagen issue, is connective tissue disease, where your collagen doesn't form right and it's sort of loose and not great, and so the body just sort of breaks down. What is scurvy? Scurvy is where you're not making enough proper collagen because vitamin C helps catalyze the hydroxylation of I think it's proline and lysine. And if they're not, they haven't gone through that reaction, they don't bind together tightly, and so they're a bit loose and they break down, and you get scurvy. Well, that's similar to these connective tissue issues. So that right there, if you don't have proper protein, your body's breaking down. Very interestingly, I was talking to Sean Baker about this, and he was saying that no one's worked with more carnivore people than he has. He's been collecting data as well. He's got over like 12,000 people, right. And that he's been studying. And so this is like big time, data that's going to be coming out when he's ready to publish all this. He has patients with Ehlers-Danlos, and he finds that not even going full carnivore, but just eating a lot more meat, they get rid of their Ehlers-Danlos. Yeah. Because presumably, their bodies aren't making collagen properly, but it doesn't matter because they're getting adequate collagen in their diet. And so now their bodies actually work better. These diseases, they break down your joints. They have, very serious, pain, hypermobility. It's kind of fun at first. Maybe it helps you in ballet early on, but then your joints just break down. But it does. There's a lot of. I've known a lot of successful ballerinas because you have to be very flexible and do this, these crazy splits and all that sort of stuff. And they can, because they've got hypermobile joints. And that's because they have Ehlers-Danlos and their connective tissue is weak. And so they're putting a lot of stress on their joints they're already weaker, and they break down faster. And so they get, very, very painful, old arthritic joints, in their early 20s. They don't need to. If they were eating more meat and just the majority of meat, not even necessarily completely carnivore, but probably keto and ketovore, what they call it, these kids are calling it these days. Their Ehlers-Danlos goes away. So protein is extremely important in your body for a number of different reasons. But I think just plain and simple, it's what we're made out of. It's our structural component of our body. And, you screw with that, at your own peril. I really believe that.
And here are the closing remarks from registered dietitian Michelle Hearn, all about protein recommendations. When we're thinking about protein in the diet, what kind of levels should we be shooting for? Do you think of that as something we should be maybe tracking, or something we need to be aware of as far as hitting a certain amount of protein in a day?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think, unfortunately, if you look at the recommended dietary allowance, it is 0.08 grams per kilogram. That is laughably low. We have had people advocating for the last 20 years, just saying this is not enough. When they actually, when they came up with that amount, they were using healthy teenage males. What is the amount of protein you need not to die? And not to thrive, to grow, for, life stress conditions. So, that ends up being, I want to say, for somebody, who's 150 pounds, ends up being 60 or 65 grams of protein. That's an incredibly small amount. But what does that let us do? That's led us to tell people oh, you only need 2 ounces of meat or 3 ounces of meat. That is not enough. Here's another thing. When you undereat animal protein and fat, guess what's going to make up the rest of your diet? I've seen this over and over again. It's going to be carbohydrates. When people eat less, if you're eating less steak or less burgers or less chicken, you're probably going to eat more pasta and more bread and more snacks. And that's the exact opposite way for health. So how I like to look at protein synthesis, ideally is you do want to spread it throughout the day. Like, some people I know just want to do one large meal a day. And, I'll never tell somebody if something's working for you, whatever. But we know that your body does better. Your body is able to synthesize protein when you spread it out. So I always, they say kind of a general guide for healthy people is 1 gram per pound. That is a lot more, So for me, if I'm following the recommended dietary guidelines, I'm probably tells me I need about 40 grams or 44 grams of protein. I don't weigh myself, but between 125 and 130 pounds. So I actually am going to make sure that I get in 120 to 130 grams of protein. And since I'm incredibly active, I'm an ultra runner, I often will get more than that, and I'm going to make sure too that it's spread throughout the day. I don't necessarily think you have to do exactly, this many grams, this many grams, this many grams, but they have found that just 4 ounces of beef, about 28 grams. So usually shoot for about, 25, me personally as a smaller female, 25 to 30 grams per meal and I can meet my target easily. For someone who's bigger, they might need twice as much. So that's not a 2 ounce portion of meat, that's 6 to 8 ounces. That's a lot. Animal protein makes up a lot of my diet. And if you get on Google or God help you, like some of those physicians committee or nonsense, they're going to tell you that, it's going to be bad for your heart. It's going to kill you. And I can tell you, from my personal experience, clinical experience, all of the research I've looked at, that people who switch to these animal-based low-carb diets, we completely transform our health. Like this is how humans were supposed to eat. Because finally you're actually providing your body with enough nutrition, enough amino acids, you're stabilizing your blood sugar. So yeah, I guess that was a long way of saying about, depending on your health, about 25 to 30 grams minimum, unless you're a very small human. And then, it can be up to 50 or to 60 grams, maybe even more if you're a very large human.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we love that advice. We knew you were the perfect person to invite on. Michelle Hearn, registered dietitian and author of Dietitian's Dilemma. Where do you want people to go to find you?
Yeah, check me out on Instagram. I'm at Run, Eat, Meet, Repeat. I'm also on Twitter at Michelle Hearn RD. And yeah, if you're interested in the Dietitian's Dilemma, my book, you can get that on Amazon. We've got a paperback, Audible, and ebook. That's awesome. And we have to, for the listener, we have to recommend that you follow Michelle on Instagram because the videos you do with your wife are absolutely brilliant and fantastic. Please keep them going. They're very funny and very serious all at the same time. Thank you. We have a lot of fun making those.
That's great. Thank you so much. Well, that was quite the deep dive into the topic of protein. We very much want to thank our guests who took the time to be on our show, be hosted on our show. We're so grateful for them and all the information that they are bringing to the table, all the content that they're delivering, all the research that they're doing. We just so much appreciate them and that information and that they would be willing to come and share that on our show. Really grateful for all of them. I do want to leave a few final comments. In the last 3 or 4 months, I have been really thinking about my personal diet and I have been trying to sub out calories of fat and sub in calories of protein. I've been doing a low carbohydrate or no carbohydrate diet for a very long time. For a lot of people that are starting on a low carbohydrate diet, I find that really lean proteins aren't very helpful because they don't have enough fat that helps teach the body to burn more fat. But I've been doing this now for several years. I've been on variations of, carnivore diets for the last 3.5 years. And so I'm pretty well adapted at this point, and I figured it would be a good time to experiment with increasing my protein intake and decreasing my fat intake. And I've been doing that by eating things that I have classically not eaten in many, many years. Things like chicken breast, things like plain Greek yogurt, things like low-fat cottage cheese. These are all very high protein and low-fat items. And I just wanted to see what would happen if I incorporated that in, again, after several years of being on a low carbohydrate diet. So I really started this experiment in April of 2022. I have been tracking closely my body fat mass, my muscle mass, and seeing how those numbers have changed. As the time of this recording, it is the end of July, early August, and I've been able to see that I have basically lost about 8 pounds of pure fat. My total weight has gone from the 180s down into the 170s, which is really nice. Found that 8 pounds of what I have lost is actually validated as coming from fat, which is great. And I have been been able to add some muscle mass in that time as well. As I've started to add more cardio in during the summer, that's been a little bit more challenging, but especially through April and May when I wasn't cycling that much, I was still able to grow muscle, a pound or two, which has been great. And through the summer, even with an increase in cardio, I've been able to maintain that pretty well and have a net gain from that time of 1.5 pounds of muscle. So that's been really great. I did post about all of this on Facebook. So feel free to go back to my Facebook page, which I'll tag in the show notes, and go back to July 14th, 2022. I really tried to document this as well as I could. I tracked my food for that day so that you could get all the exact numbers. I added up the cost. I showed pictures of different things that I was eating, mostly eggs, lots of meat, and things like I said, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, a little bit of whey protein, and also experimenting with creatine supplementation as well. So I hope you have enjoyed this episode. I hope you've taken some lessons away from this, and namely that protein is extremely important. We do prefer that you get it from animal sources, but even if you get it from plant sources and follow a plant-based diet, really focus in on this macronutrient and try to get enough of it. We can't iterate enough. The general guidelines that they give us to meet for protein intake are far, far, far too low. I believe that they will absolutely cause muscle wasting. They will absolutely cause bone issues and all kinds of other problems. We really want to protect our muscle mass like we learned today from all our amazing guests. So please make this a priority. Make sure that you're eating protein. Literally eat it the first thing that you eat in a meal and have the other things kind of go to where they need to go for you to feel good. As always, nutrition is very unique and individual, but we feel very strongly about protein, about making it a priority, and that's why we chose to start this podcast episode series with focusing on protein. Look for many of these to come, and thank you for joining us on this Boundless Body Premium Podcast episode. Thank you so very much for listening to this special episode taken from the Boundless Body Radio Premium Podcast. If you haven't already, please follow our show on Apple Podcasts and be sure to leave us a rating and review on that platform, as it is the best way to continue to get our message out to new people all over the world. And as we said in the introduction, feel free to book a 30-minute complimentary session with us on our website at myboundlessbody.com so we can discuss your health and fitness goals and help you come up with a plan. Thank you so very much, as always, for listening to Boundless Body Radio.